I think it's a testimony to Bitcoin itself, the fact that even though we followed all of these bad privacy practices, 70% of the coins still got to the truckers. Like 0% of the fiat got to the truckers, right?
Yeah.
So
that's the key takeaway here, in my opinion, is that despite everything thrown at it, it still got a 7 out of 10 rating.
Yeah, on his first bat up, on his first up to bat, right?
Yeah. So
the hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness, 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 happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure.
Welcome to One Love Bitcoin. I'm your host, Trod. My goal is to take you on a journey with me all around the world, to talk to Bitcoiners from every country, and maybe we'll learn a thing or two. So this week, we're heading to Canada, and we're talking to a man who needs no introduction, BTC Sessions. He has a show on YouTube called BTC Sessions that he hosts, and he's been doing this for, 6 or 7 years, teaching us everything from how to set up a node, to how to use different wallets, to the current events that are going on day in and day out. And honestly, he's the one that orange pilled me to know most of what I know about Bitcoin in the beginning. So, there's not enough I can say about BTC Sessions, but this episode, we talked a lot about Canada. We talked about the Freedom Convoy protests, and, we did a deep dive into Canada's politics and really, talked honestly about what's going on there and what the future holds. Yeah, I mean, there's a concentration of Bitcoiners in Canada that are doing big things, that are productive, I guess you could say. But anyway, it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking to him as well. I mean, I always enjoy talking to BTC Sessions, one of the people that I'm always learning something from. So I hope you enjoy this conversation too. And all the Canadians or Canadian expats or anybody else around the world that's watching this, go to canada.onelovebitcoin.com and get yourself some free Satoshis. You should never pass up free Satoshis. Just get yourself a Lightning wallet, download it, scan the QR code, bam, you got free Lightning in your hands. The favorite thing that I like this week is probably going to be the thing that I've been working on for months. Plebnet is one of my favorite communities, and I am building some really cool tools on the Start9 Embassy for Plebnet. So for the Plebnet people that are out there, look out for a really cool suite of tools that you're probably already using, but now you can download them and install them on your Start9 Embassy pretty easily. So check that out. And I want to give a shout out to Swan Bitcoin. They're the ones that got me started on this journey. And I'm really appreciative of how much I've learned along the journey so far. I mean, I did not expect this amount of global knowledge to be fire hosed towards me when I first agreed to do this. But I'm really happy that I'm doing it now. And, if it wasn't for Swan, I probably wouldn't have done it. If it wasn't for Corey having this idea, I probably wouldn't have done it. So if you're in the US, go ahead and check them out. Buying from Swan is pretty cheap. But if you're not in the US, like I always say, check out the peer-to-peer markets that are out there. Paxful is a great one. They're all across the US, Africa, the Caribbean, and you can find liquidity there by just searching in your country, or hit me up on Telegram. Telegram is a great place to do peer-to-peer as well. I think that's it. I don't need to say anything else really about this episode. All right, brethrens and sisterins, as usual, full joy this one. One love.
Chinese chicken. You have a drumstick and your brain stops sticking. Watching X-Files with no lights on, with all our Masons. I hope the smoking man's in this one like Harrison Ford. I'm getting frantic, like Stingham Tantric, like Snickers guaranteed to satisfy. Like Kurosawa, I make mad films. Okay, I don't make films, but if I did, they'd have a samurai. Gonna get a set of better clubs, gonna find the kind with tiny nubs, so my irons are always flying off the backswing. Gonna get into my Sailor Moon, cause that cartoonist got the boom anime babes that make me think the wrong thing. How can I help it if I think you're funny when you're mad? Trying hard not to smile, though I feel bad. I'm the kind of guy who laughs at a funeral. Can't understand what I mean, you soon will. I have a tendency to wear my mind on my sleeve. I have a history of losing my shirt. It's been 1 week since you looked at me, dropped your arms to the sides and said I'm sorry. 5 days since I laughed at you and said you just did just what I thought you were gonna do. 3 days since the living room, we realized we're both to blame, but what could we do? Yesterday, you just smiled at me, cause it'll still be 2 days till we say we're sorry. It'll still be 2 days till we say we're sorry. It'll still be 2 days till we say we're sorry. Birchmount Stadium, home under the Robbie.
Ben, BTC Sessions. Welcome to One Love Bitcoin, Bridget.
Dude, glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm flattered.
Oh yeah, the honor is all mine as well. Like I've said many times to you before, you're one of the main reasons I even got into Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin maximalism, because I was shitcoining before. But
so do many of us.
Yep, I'm really happy I took the path down with you since 2017. But I would love for you to tell people from Canada and all over the world, exactly who you are, how you got into, your current status as the Bitcoin person for the daily session, and any tutorial you ever need is up there on YouTube. How'd you get to that point?
So I stumbled across Bitcoin a few times, like a lot of people. I think just from seeing number go up, in the news a few times, and you noticed it and you pass it by a handful of times. So that time frame for me was noticing it through 2013 during that kind of big bull run up. I saw the headlines each time it would hit a new price point, and I think that I'd missed the boat. But basically shortly after kind of like the all-time high in late 2013, which would have been the run up to $1,200 from like double-digit prices earlier that year. I know. It sounds hilarious to even talk about that, but that was the time that it was in my face a few times through different articles and what have you. And so after that run up, I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll start reading about it, because either there's something here or it's a scam, and so I spent a few months reading whatever I could, trying to find videos and stuff. It was pretty sparse back then. There's Andreas's early stuff, but outside of that, there wasn't a ton. It was pretty much like go to message boards and try to decipher what the hell is going on, which wasn't super easy. Yeah.
Between all the QAnon stuff.
yeah, exactly. So more or less what ended up happening was after about 2 to 3 months of trying to understand at least a few things, I ended up buying a tiny bits just to kind of experiment. I downloaded Bitcoin Core or at the time Bitcoin QT, and just found a website in Canada where you could do Interac e-transfer to buy small amounts of Bitcoin for $50 at a time or something like that.
Okay.
And right around that time, I think it was like within a week of my first purchase was when Mount Gox collapsed. And yeah, so I had just mentioned to my friends, hey, I bought a little bit of Bitcoin. I'm curious about it. And then that is plastered all over the news. And obviously the news was Bitcoin is hacked and nobody understood what was actually going on. But luckily I had read enough to understand that the headlines were inaccurate. So I just kind of stayed the course, and my first year in Bitcoin was watching an 80% drawdown of everything I'd owned, but, I also understood again that the headlines were not reflective of the reality. And so
how were you able to understand that so early? Was it because of the other message boards or?
Yeah, I think just kind of looking through as much of the information as I could, and just understanding that the headlines, like when I read a headline saying that Bitcoin was hacked, I knew that wasn't the case. I understood that Mount Gox was a company holding other people's money for them. It was
Okay.
effectively a poorly run bank.
Okay.
And so I was able to understand that nothing had changed in terms of the minimal amount that I understood about Bitcoin and why it was important, and why it seemed to work. So I figured, well, unless something in terms of the actual protocol broke, then I would just kind of stay the course and learn more and gradually accumulate a bit. And so it was a tough first couple of years, even just trying to understand anything. And so as I just tinkered myself and got frustrated and tried to learn just through doing, about 2 years in, I felt comfortable enough with my background. I had kind of done a little bit of teaching. I've had some general video editing skills, and I was comfortable. I'd been a performer previously, so I was
Okay.
comfortable in front of a camera.
That
So
helps.
that helped. And basically, yeah, I was like, well, I will just once a week make a video on how to use something that I previously had trouble with, and hopefully help some people along the way. And so I started doing that once a week, and I haven't stopped. And it's coming up on 6 years now. Yeah. And I've
Wow.
obviously increased the frequency of videos, but yeah, I've been basically doing the channel for 6 years.
Yeah.
And I just kept on, I just kept on making videos, and there was always something new to cover. There's always something new to try. And enough trial and error and screwing up, you can learn a lot. So here I am. I've been doing the channel since 2016, after getting into Bitcoin in 2014. And it's had, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 6 million views. It's tens of thousands of subscribers, which I'm super grateful for. And yeah, now this is my full-time job. I'm not employed by anyone. I just make stuff and I'm happy.
That's
That's it.
amazing. That is the dream. And I'll put the show in the show notes so everybody can see it and go visit it if they want. How did you come up with the different, because I know the daily session was kind of the beginning, or even before that, you were kind of doing your own journey into maximalism and other videos like that. But then the daily session became like the staple. And then after that,
Yeah.
you started like branching off into other ones. Like, how did you come up with these different, do you have like a media team? I don't know what.
No, I just figured, if I was gonna try and make this my full-time gig, I would want to do a few different things. And so now I typically do one tutorial every week, a news show every week, and then the Friday show, which is Why Are We Bullish? So the panel of different Bitcoiners is discussing what they're excited about at the end of each week. And then usually I'll kind of chop up some of the Why Are We Bullish, some of the most bullish bits, and I'll throw those out there. And every once in a while, I will make a lightning session or like a mini tutorial, a 2-minute condensed tutorial on whatever I think needs an explanation. So those are the pieces of content that I make. On average, between the especially the bullish bits and the longer form content, usually about 7 videos drop every week. But some of them are kind of recycled content too. So, but lots. It was a gradual progression. Yeah. The Fridays are super easy though. The Fridays are just such a chill, fun thing. The only stuff that feels like any amount of work is just reaching out to people and being like, hey, you want to come on the show? And then Friday comes and it's just, I get to hang out and chat with awesome people. And I love it. It's crazy that it's work because it's not.
Yeah. And it's also work where you're interacting with people every day, different people. Some are just videos on your own, like you said, but for the most part, you're talking with people that you enjoy talking to. That's a pretty cool way to live. But it's also all online, right? Do you have any kind of in-person events that, apart from the big conferences and stuff, anything local, like meetups you go to?
So there's a couple guys that put together a meetup called YYC Bitcoin. So here in Calgary where I live, and I try to hit that. It's been a little while because I've been doing stuff with my family and everything, but I try to hit that whenever I can, because both the guys that run it are awesome. So I don't locally organize anything myself just because I don't have the bandwidth to do so, but also I do tend to, especially the past couple of years, I do probably travel, I'd say different of Bitcoin related events, maybe 3 or 4 times a year now, which is a lot, especially when I've got 2 kids. So I try to balance that with family travel and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the ideal would be to bring them with you, right? Have a family vacation every time you have a trip to make. I know that's not always
Yeah.
possible, but
Yeah. It's a little bit of tightrope walking, but my wife and kids get some trips out of it, so they're happy.
yeah. And you guys take beautiful pictures, I have to say. Like
That
every
that
single
would
time I
be
see them.
my wife. She's big into photography. She's got her nice camera and everything. Yeah, but she's awesome with it.
So Canada has like, they're like one of the more established countries in the world that in terms of Bitcoin, there's huge Bitcoin businesses there. A lot of people that are known in the space that are from Canada. Do you feel like there is a coalition in Canada that of Bitcoiners that might have some kind of, I don't want to get straight political, but some kind of sway, in the direction that Canada is going? I guess the more general question is, what direction do you think Canada is going? Right?
That's a tough question right now, man, because there's been some pretty divisive stuff, obviously, that's gone on recently with the protests and the Emergencies Act and everything that's been going on. It's been pretty wild. I will say there's some incredible Bitcoiners in Canada, right? There's, we got Jeff Booth, we got Greg Foss. Francis Pouliot isn't in Canada, but his company does run here, Bull Bitcoin, and that's awesome. I've got some friends out here in Calgary and Alberta in general, running a company called Bitcoin Well. I've done some work. No. So they do same kind of thing. Like you can pay your bills with Bitcoin, you can buy Bitcoin. They have ATMs around. Okay. And then to your point about flared gas, obviously, like Steve from Upstream Data, he's in the same city as me.
Nice.
And yeah. And so there's just, I don't know, there's this incredible concentration of really great Bitcoiners within Canada, even though we're pretty, it's a pretty spread out country, it's pretty large, but it does feel like there is potential, but I don't want to be, I've become a little bit disillusioned this past few months with how quickly things can shift and some of the precedents that have been set by the existing government. Now there is promise on the other side of the aisle. We've got a guy named Pierre Poilievre that is incredibly Bitcoin friendly. He was on a podcast with Robert Breedlove. He's friends with Greg Foss and Jeff Booth. He has obviously just recently went down to Tahini's and bought a shawarma with Bitcoin. And he's basically in the run to be the leader of the opposition, in which case, if he got that, then he would run for prime minister eventually, a few years out. So, there's promise, but there's a lot of ifs there. So, I'm not going to hold my breath. And I'll just try and prepare for the worst, but hope for the best.
That's an optimistic way of looking at it. I have been following him as well, and I saw his Bitcoin purchase and his Bitcoin coming out of the closet. In other words, about Bitcoin. I am, concerned about other things that he said as well, but I do believe that anybody that has Bitcoin as their main platform, like he's doing, it's only going to be good for the overall adoption, even if he doesn't make it the prime minister. the more
Yeah.
people that you have on that ladder is always going to be improving.
Yeah.
So,
And I think in the end, it in a sense is legitimizing Bitcoin too, to have somebody in that type of position saying, hey, like this is an option for people that don't like the direction of our monetary policy here. This is a hedge, a way to put your assets and the fruits of your labor in something that can't be debased. And he brings up a lot of good points in and around the idea of currency. He had a great speech to Parliament, which he said was very much informed by the Bitcoin standard from Saifedean.
nice.
So, there's a number of positives there that, I hope continue down that road. But again, time will tell.
Okay. Yeah, I'll keep my fingers crossed because you know that the Caribbean in general is always impacted by what happens in North America. So I'm always looking for both. I mean, I know that there are laggards in the space, but I'm always looking for the US and Canada to just keep moving that needle forward towards, favorable Bitcoin regulation or just overall Bitcoin adoption, because it's all gonna help us since we owe you guys all the money.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's there's a few things that I think that Canada has done right in terms of Bitcoin that the US is being a bit of a laggard on, in particular around like the ETFs. Man, US is dragging their feet. I think I don't even know how many
time now. I think it's the third time they've just decided not to approve it, right?
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous that the US currently does not have a Bitcoin ETF. Meanwhile, they have all these closed-end funds, which are totally skewed. Like the discount on GBTC is like deeply double digits. And yet they have these futures markets, which can manipulate the hell out of the price when you don't have a spot option. And so it's really stupid. And not to mention in Canada, we've had Bitcoin ETFs for ages now, for, I think a year and a half, 2 years now, and multiple, like many options for Bitcoin ETFs here in Canada. And so it's this elephant in the room of why in the hell aren't you approving a spot ETF? It's interesting saying that, there was an article the other day where Grayscale, they didn't say that they were going to for sure do anything, but they definitely didn't rule out the idea of legal action if the ETF conversion bid doesn't get approved. But we'll see how it plays out. I'm thankful that Canada has been like, it doesn't make sense to reject this anymore.
Yeah, even Brazil made an ETF now as well. So I'm really surprised at least for the people who are in that space that want to profit off of it, I'm surprised they haven't done an approval by now. Yeah.
I think there's money in not approving it for now.
Definitely. That's the only reason, right? There's definitely money in not approving it. I've always been excited about how much the mining infrastructure is in Canada. And I'm guessing that's because of the climate that always helps with Bitcoin mining, and B, because you guys have the resources to be able to generate a lot of natural electricity from, the dam, and you just have low energy prices. How do you see that impacting mining on the long run, in the long term, in terms of Canada actually using their natural resources fully to mine Bitcoin, or maybe a decentralized version of that,
Yeah, well, there's a couple different aspects to that. So one thing that we kind of saw over the past few years was there was a ton of mining in and around Quebec from hydro, and that was going well. But then and Blockstream was there; they were doing a bunch of mining. But then the government, the provincial government in Quebec, decided to change the electricity rates to what it ended up doing was discourage miners from using the infrastructure anymore. And so Blockstream included, a number of miners just basically packed up shop and moved elsewhere. So there's an example of stupid government moves basically causing industry to go elsewhere. We're seeing kind of the opposite, at least initially here in Alberta, with Steve and Upstream Data. They're effectively going after miners or going after oil and gas wells and saying, hey, you guys are flaring, which effectively means when you dig for oil, there's going to be excess gases, natural gas and methane. And when there's no infrastructure in terms of pipelines and stuff to get it out and get it to market, then you effectively have to burn it or just vent it directly into the atmosphere, both of which are not great, not really great, especially methane. In fact, methane is 80 times as bad as CO2. And so, and so what Steve and Upstream Data have been able to do is they're able to capture that methane, use it to power Bitcoin miners, which then converts it into CO2. So the emissions are effectively reduced by a factor of 80. So 80 times less emissions by funneling this methane into powering Bitcoin miners. On top of that, the carbon taxes that were being experienced by that particular well for having emitted so much are now reduced. And the profits have gone up from something that would have just been straight waste. So it's not only a huge win for the oil and gas well operator, but also in general, just for pollutants in the atmosphere, massive reduction, massive increase in efficiency in terms of how use our energy. So, it's a massive win-win, and it seems to be proliferating everywhere, but in particular, Alberta, where I live, there's a lot of oil and gas. And so it's really cool to see that at home here expanding.
Do you think that since some of the big dogs are jumping in, like Exxon just announced a partnership to start mining, do you think that a lot of other oil and gas companies locally in Canada and internationally really are going to follow suit? Because I know oil and gas is kind of a traditional old boys, we're going to do it this way and not change. So if Exxon decides to change, I feel like, is that a big domino that just fell?
Yeah, I think it's just one of the, I don't think we've even seen which dominoes have toppled yet, because like that domino toppled a year and a bit ago. And it's just kind of leaking out that they're looking at expanding that pilot program to 4 other countries. So clearly the initial pilot over the past year has been successful enough that they want to try it in multiple other areas. And that seems to denote that, a larger rollout down the road. And if Exxon is doing it, you've got to imagine that some of the other guys are looking at it. And if they aren't, they are now, because they just saw that Exxon is doing it. So I think a lot of eyes are being opened to this. And it's again, bringing to light the idea that the previous belief on behalf of a lot of people that, Bitcoin is basically going to destroy the world and eat up all the energy. No, it's capitalizing on waste gases in this instance, and actually reducing how harmful the emissions are, while powering a monetary network that is nowhere near as inefficient as the fiat and legacy financial system.
I mean, I would assume even if there's people that really don't care about the emissions and how damaging it is to the atmosphere or to Earth in general, they would still care about money. And if they're being fined for the emissions that they're currently putting out, just the fact that they'll be fined less by burning it and creating money in the meantime, I would have thought that would have been an incentive years ago. But it seems like society moves a lot slower than I would like it to. People always call me an accelerationist. Because I really want hyper-Bitcoinization to hurry up and get here. And that could mean, anything from, additional QE,
Mhm.
people, pushing all these things to move faster, because there's going to be a point in time where the economy of violence is going to boil over. Like, you can see it happening already in Europe. And
Yeah.
I'm concerned that we're not going to be at a place where we can transition smoothly before that happens. What are your thoughts about that in Canada? I mean, you guys had a really rough time over the past couple of months, and you saw a little bit of that economy of violence happen there. So
Yeah.
how do you see that transition happening from that kind of control with violence to moving away from it slowly, or draining them of that power?
Well, I'm trying to think of what angle I want to go at this from. Well, I mean, in general, the government that we have right now is in terms of monetary policy. Basically, they don't look at monetary policy at all. They don't care. And they've just kind of allied themselves with another political party, which effectively gives them free reign to do whatever the hell they want, as long as those two parties agree with each other. Yeah. Until 2025, effectively, which is wonderful. But if anything, those two parties together will, as you mentioned, through various forms of QE, likely usher in a much sooner happenstance of hyper Bitcoinization, at least within Canada, because they're going to have no regard with any sort of budgeting or like paying fiscal attention to anything that they're doing. Because the policies brought forth by both of these parties tend to be that money doesn't matter, that it can just be placed and created and spent with no repercussions whatsoever, despite the fact that housing prices have effectively doubled since our prime minister has been in office in 2015. The average price of a house went from $400 and something thousand to $800 and something thousand in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like, I went to Vancouver and I didn't see anything there. I wasn't even looking, but just the prices were so outrageous. Like a loft was $1 million anywhere you looked. And I was like, this place doesn't even look that, it's a nice city. It's a beautiful, matter of fact, it's one of the most beautiful cities I've seen in Canada. But $1 million for a loft, for a 1-bedroom?
No.
Make any sense?
It's ridiculous. Yeah. And so this is what we're seeing across the board. Everything is just getting more and more expensive because the monetary policy paired with the fiscal policy allows for that to happen. And I doubt there's going to be any slowing down on that front for the next 3 years, more or less. Now, in terms of the economy of violence and the idea of shifting that away, I think we saw a little bit of a shift in that with the protests, in that we saw the craziest thing that I never thought I would see happen, but what is effectively martial law called into Canada. Now, was it enacted to the full extent of, military in the streets? No, it wasn't that. But that as soon as the Emergencies Act is in place, then all bets are off, so they basically chose what avenue wanted to go after. And so they were able to shut down people's bank accounts. They were able to effectively freeze the GoFundMe page and prevent those funds from getting where they were intended. They were able to not freeze the Give, Send, Go page, but the bank account that those funds were going to go to, which was, I think it was TD Bank, basically froze the funds as soon as they arrived. So the banking system was basically entirely screwed. Like if you weren't on board with the sentiment of the existing government, then tough. If you were in any way helping, if you were seen as being able to still contribute in some way, shape, or form, there's a possibility your bank account would be shut down. And in terms of any legacy finance fundraising that happened, none of it was getting where it was supposed to, or where it was intended to go. Now, there were also, of course, Bitcoin donations that happened. And while some of them, and I think due to improper privacy practices, some of those were eventually not confiscated, but basically, I believe, sit in escrow. Yeah. Well, basically, around 30% of the funds, I believe, currently sit in an escrow awaiting the outcome of a lawsuit.
Okay.
But that said, to my understanding of it, 70% of all donated Bitcoin actually got into, at least initially, into the hands of the intended recipients. And to the best of my knowledge, those funds are the only ones that so far and continue to not be able to be actually taken.
Right.
And again, as I said, the other 30%, I more or less user error.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but it does point out the fact that Bitcoin as a censorship resistant form of payment does indeed have that quality. And that does a little bit change the again, the violence mechanism, the ability to force somebody to hand over funds. I mean, Nick or Nobody Caribou on Twitter, who was basically helping with all of this, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said what this in the end does is it forces governments and legal entities to actually go through proper checks and balances, and to actually go and say, hey, we have a legal precedent to take this. They can't just take it and then ask questions later. It actually requires there to be a due process in the instance of some of these funds. So it does shift.
Just some understanding.
The balance
That's
of power.
because they're not able to just brute force take it from you without having the legal backing that they need to be able to request it from you. Because like unlike gold or cash, you can't just grab it. You can't just SWAT team you, right? And then afterwards go do due process. So I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and that's a pretty interesting dynamic to watch play out. Again, like the 70% that went to actual truckers, I'm a little bit out of the loop at this point, but my understanding was there was just a static list versus that were sent to exchanges, and they said if this address sends you Bitcoin, then freeze those funds.
Right.
But a static list of addresses is not exactly how Bitcoin works, right? Like Bitcoin goes from address to address, and that list would have to grow and be ever growing for all time, or you would have to put a lot of onus on exchanges to look back X number of hops on every single transaction that they deal with, and that may just not be feasible at all. And that's putting aside the idea of people using PayJoin and CoinJoin and side chains and all these other mechanisms that
Lightning.
Lightning, other things that basically throw a wrench into that way of thinking a little bit. So in the end, it's been a massive experiment. The world has been watching, as has Canada. And I think a lot of lessons were learned by all. And we'll see what happens next, man. But it's an interesting one. I have to speak relatively delicately here, but it's been an incredible precedent to watch this play out.
Yeah. The truckers that received the money, I mean, first of all, I'm thankful that they did receive it, because there was every step along the way you have detractors. And even in my groups that I chat with, my normie groups, there were detractors that were like, oh, this will never work. Oh, they'll never get the money. Oh, they'll never spend it. Oh, every single step of the way until they saw it all happen. And they're like, oh, it works.
Yeah.
But my concern is, to your point, one, the privacy practices that were followed weren't exactly the best. And how does that affect the truckers that received those funds? Because some of those truckers are actually doxxed now, as you know, and people know they have the Bitcoin, even if it's not that much. How does that are we worried about, in the future doing something like this, and what practices we can use to protect the people that are actually doing the actual protest, or actually, fighting for their freedom?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of, in terms of best practices for privacy, a lot of things were not as good as they could have been. And again, like I've said multiple times, I take full responsibility for the initial, a lot of those initial steps, because unfortunately, like with the speed at which things were going and the initial thought, like, again, to give an idea, the initial goal of the fundraiser was 10 million sats. It's
Did
like
you guys even
$4,000.
expect that much? I mean, I didn't even
No.
expect people to notice, much less start donating.
Like again, I said it for 0.1 Bitcoin was the goal. And all of a sudden, within like 24 hours, a whole Bitcoin was there. And then when all the stuff that, like, it was set up prior to GoFundMe and GiveSendGo having issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just shone a whole new spotlight on it. So things just started snowballing way faster. I was not, I'm basically not super familiar with how to utilize BTC Pay servers, just not something I've dove into yet. It's now something on my priority list.
New video coming out soon.
Yeah, that's probably in the docket, but like Tallycoin was used because of ease of use, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could set it up in like a couple minutes, link it to a Lightning node, and also accept on chain. The only problem is, even if you upload an XPub, it will only use a single static address for each new fundraiser that you create. So no matter what, there's going to be a static Bitcoin address associated with a singular fundraiser.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so inherent to the platform that was used, there was no alternative option, and you could not change the address after the fact. And that's a security measure in case somebody were to hack into your account and change the address to their own.
Right.
So effectively, like, one of the thoughts initially were Bitcoiners, don't trust, verify. So having a static address where every Bitcoiner can be like, okay, well, here's the funds, here's where they're going, I now trust this. And then again, having publicly identifiable names associated with it, so people could say, okay, well, I know these people and I'm more comfortable donating. Little did we know that the government was going to turn around and basically make the protest, like a peaceful protest, more or less illegal.
Yeah.
And then villainize anybody donating, and then start shutting down bank accounts and shutting off fundraisers and preventing all this stuff from happening. That was not something that was thought of prior, because it was so out of the realm of possibility in everybody's heads that would happen in a week. But it did. And so, looking back, best privacy practices, even in tiny instances, are, I think, should be default now. So like using a BTC Pay server where every donor gets a new address, or using Paynims or Lightning donations or whatever it may be. And then after donations come through, doing CoinJoin, things like that. And on top of it, actually having privacy for those giving the funds. Now, the trade-off there is Bitcoiners think don't trust, verify. You're going to have to instill some trust, push and pull. And so had those privacy practices been observed, then a higher percentage of the funds probably would have gotten directly to where they needed to be, but a much lower percentage would have been donated in the first place, probably less than actually made it in the end to those recipients.
It's a good
So
perspective. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know what the right answer is, but now I in the context of everything that's happened, I'd say that privacy practices should probably be put front and center for pretty much anything that you're doing, just in
Mhm.
case. You never know, like it, and this applies around the globe, right? It's not, if a government can shut down and make illegal the a movement that you support, or a movement that you don't support, then the opposite is true, right? Like, if somebody didn't agree with the protests and they thought, good, the government made that protest illegal. Just think, if you zoom out, the opposition party gets in and they don't like your protest, the precedent has been set that they can make it illegal like that.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep. And it's crazy to see it happen in Canada because it's Canada, but this has been happening all over the world. I just had a conversation with Farida about Togo, where they've been doing that for years, maybe decades. And they have, sophisticated digital surveillance tools tracking them, so they can't even, protest if they wanted to. And the privacy tools for them, it's more like life and death. Like, they can't afford to make those kind of mistakes. So I really feel like, the fact that Canada was used as a proving ground to see how this works is a good thing, because then people who are building these privacy tools can look at that as a use case to say, okay, well, let's not do it that way. Let's improve a lot of these things and make it more automatic for people who, like, let's say Tallycoin wants to revamp their platform now. They know exactly what they need to do to be able to revamp it. So it, all donations end up in a coin join, for example. And also, I think it's a testimony to Bitcoin itself, the fact that even though we followed all of these bad privacy practices, 70% of the coins still got to the truckers. Like 0% of the fiat got to the truckers, right?
Yeah.
So
that's the key takeaway here, in my opinion, is that despite everything thrown at it, it still got a 7 out of 10 rating.
On his first bat up, on his first up to bat, right?
So yeah, it's not a bad showing, and there's definitely a lot to learn, but again, the world was watching, and you're right. Like, for the one thing that you said that caught me too is it's surprising that it happened in Canada. It's also surprising that the protest, of all places, started in Canada, because like the entire time I've been thinking, like, Canada's a pretty compliant bunch. Or it's not a typically a rise up against our leaders kind of country. But this was the largest protest in Canadian history, and like it was unprecedented, the amount of people that were supporting this movement. And it does make me a little bit sad that things have gotten so divided, but I also do feel a little bit of a swell of pride that Canadians in the dead of winter, when it's negative 30 degrees, like at negative 30, like, if you don't know, you can take a bucket of boiling water and throw it into the air and it turns to snow. That's how cold. And people were outside on overpasses waving flags and cheering on as the protest got underway. So again, for it to have happened here with a predominantly, pretty compliant, group of people, to have finally reached a breaking point and been like, this isn't okay, we need to say something, and to have remained peaceful throughout, despite the smearing that we saw throughout the media, and to have such a crazy response from the government, and to have been ground zero for Bitcoin's first real, what I would say is one of the biggest headlines of the year, if not the past number of years. Pretty wild.
Yeah, it's wild. And I am hopeful because of it, because of the outcome of it, and it shows exactly how weak a government can be, especially when it's powerful as Canada. It gives me a lot of hope for all the other governments out there right now that are thinking about doing all these things like CBDCs and digital currencies that they want to impose. Like right now in Jamaica, they have this Jamdex digital currency. It's their version of the CBDC, and it makes me realize that people are gonna see pretty quickly the differences between a CBDC and Bitcoin when a protest happens again. Like that. Like if Canada had a CBDC right now, oh my God, it would be such a great use case.
Yeah. Well, can you imagine? They just check your they check your GPS data on your phone, and if you're at the protest, they turn off your CBDC wallet, but your Bitcoin wallet still works.
Yep.
Like there you go. There's all the example you need, because that's what's possible.
And that's kind of what Hong Kong has been doing. Well, before they took it over, before China took it over, right? They literally turned people's bank accounts off if they saw them at the protests, or if they saw them take the metro down to that protest, they would turn their bank accounts off immediately. That's dystopian, in my opinion. But anyway, that's enough political stuff. I want to know a lot more about Canada. The future for Bitcoin in Canada is kind of something that I feel like you've thought about for a long time, because a lot of people who have been to Canada have left, and a lot of people are kind of concerned about the direction it's going. But there are a lot of Canadians like you that have stayed there and have been flourishing too. I'm wondering, I guess the question I have is, how do you see things changing in order for Canadians to come back home, to repatriate, or to be comfortable enough to come back and feel like things are better, whether it's because of Bitcoin or otherwise? But of course, I'm asking because of Bitcoin.
Yeah. So, I now personally know, I think two of which I just met. I know 3 individuals who have basically left Canada, 2 of which with their entire families, that are now living in Costa Rica. Because I was recently there, and I met them down there, and they basically told me their stories of leaving the country. A lot of it, well, all of it basically had to do with government policy over the past 2 years, and mandates and passports and all that kind of stuff. And they're all Bitcoiners, and so they're kind of like sovereign individual minded. And so what would have to change? I mean, first of all, I think a lot of people that have left have kind of thrown in that towel. I don't know that they would definitely move back without drastic change, but I imagine some of the stuff that they want to see is a guarantee that some of the policies that have been enacted, and some of which still exist, are not only repealed, but made so that they're illegal to enact again in the future. So that they can't be used. The precedent of being able to just call the Emergencies Act for nothing, effectively, for a peaceful protest is crazy. And so I think people kind of want to see stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, I don't see that happening at any point in the next 3 years, obviously, because we're kind of locked in with who we have right now.
Right.
If Pierre Poilievre were to get the nom for his party, and then win the election, the next election, perhaps some of those changes may come into effect. I don't know, though. And again, I don't want to place all of my faith on an individual politician to not only sway his own party, but sway an entire government to do that kind of thing. Right. In terms of Bitcoin, I think Pierre in that seat would be quite friendly to Bitcoin. He's obviously a sound money advocate. When he was speaking at Tahini's the other day, he was talking about or Ali from Tahini's was saying, you know, accepting Bitcoin for purchases would be great. One of the major issues that we have is you're paying capital gains and all that kind of stuff. And we think it should be treated as a currency. So I could see that being something that, again, if he got the nom, especially if he's being public about Bitcoin this early on, and he were to still get the nomination and still get into the prime minister's office, then I don't see him having a problem, at least attempting to make it so that Bitcoin would be treated in a way where it's not, you're not paying capital gains every time you make a purchase. That would be a pull, I think, for some people. But yeah, man, like full disclosure, I have a book that I'm reading through right now called The Nomad Capitalists, where I'm looking at other countries.
Really? Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, like I mean, for me, the big thing is I have family here and my kids have their grandparents here, and I'm not gonna pull them away, but I'm also looking at ways to kind of diversify different parts of my life, where if shit were to get bad enough, maybe I have a you know, citizenship somewhere else. Maybe I have a secondary home. Yeah, exactly. Flag theory. Exactly. And I have never seriously entertained that until now. And now I'm doing my research, because the beginning of this year messed with me a lot.
I mean, I'm sure you already know, but I would always recommend Katie the Russian with Plan B passports. She has been a jewel of information for me and other people as well. So I'm sure she's advising you as need be.
Yeah. Katie and Jess are amazing. And I'm going to try and chat with them a little bit in Miami while I'm there too.
I'll wrap it up soon, because I know we've been talking for a while, but the two questions I would always have is, one, the beauty of Canada, right? Like everything from Whistler all the way down, I've like fallen in love with, but unfortunately, I am not a person who is adapted to cold very well. I'm a very hot-blooded Jamaican, so Canada just freezes my ass off. I went to Ukraine and nearly died, and Ukraine was not even below zero. So, you know, hats off to all those protesters and truckers that can handle it. Hats off to all of you. But if you were to recommend places in Canada for people to go and visit, whether it's visiting to see the Bitcoin crowd or just visiting to see the scenery and the scenic places you can go and touristy places you can go, where are like the top 3 places you tell people to visit?
So, I mean, Vancouver and throughout British Columbia is beautiful. So, you know, if you can always check out Vancouver, but if you're looking to get to some places that not as many people, because people think Canada and they usually list Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. Right? They kind of skip over the middle. You know, the interior of British Columbia is beautiful. So the Okanagan Valley is incredible, especially in the summertime. So that would be, you know, lake country, really unique kind of landscape. And then you can drive up towards the mountains and everything. It's fantastic down there. In my neck of the woods, I'm about an hour to an hour and a half drive away from Banff and Lake Louise, which are just incredible places in the Rocky Mountains. But then to the east of me, by about a 30-minute drive, is the Badlands. So you think like the opening scene of Jurassic Park, where they're digging up the dinosaur bones, and that's all around me too. So there's some really, really cool spots in and around Alberta and the Alberta area. And then in terms of out east, I mean, the lake country in Ontario is beautiful. I do really like Quebec City. The old town is insane. So, you know, all of those places are worth checking out. It's just, they're pretty far apart. Just to give you an idea, it took me to drive home from in and around Toronto. It took me 3 days. So it takes a while to.
Canada's that big.
Yeah, man. It takes 2 days to drive out of Ontario alone, one province. And then the only reason it only took me 3 days is because I made a beeline and did a 15-hour drive on the last day. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot of driving. I didn't realize it was that spread out. Reminds me of Australia almost.
Yeah, it's basically that. Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
Quebec, you mentioned them. I don't speak French, so what's the proportion of like English, French speaking there if you're a tourist walking in?
You'd be fine. I do not speak French either.
Really? Okay, cool. Well,
Yeah.
that
Yeah. I
settles
mean,
that.
you get a few people that are like probably not gonna fully entertain you. But for the most part, like you can go everywhere and order in English and just, yeah, you'll be fine.
I don't know why I thought most Canadians speak French, because that's a misnomer.
There's a lot. It is we do have two national languages, and
Mhm.
everything does have French and English on it, like all the labels and everything.
Mhm.
But like especially like out west in particular, like Alberta, Saskatchewan, in and around where I am, there's not as much French speaking out here.
Okay, makes sense. I've
Yeah.
been to Alberta actually. I went to a super huge water park, indoor, a mall when I
West
was there.
Edmonton Mall. Yeah.
I was like, it was the most amazing thing I've seen indoors in my life, and I
Yeah.
had a lot of fun there, to be honest.
Yeah, it was one of the biggest malls in the world at one point. It's not quite now, but it is like massive indoor water park, and there's an indoor like an indoor amusement park, like a big roller coaster and stuff. It's pretty
Yeah,
wild.
yeah, it's pretty. I would recommend family trips there if anybody wanted to amaze their kids, because I was amazed.
Yeah.
Anything you wanted to tell everyone before you wrap it up? Any last words?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in Bitcoin and you're trying to learn about just about anything, search me up, because I probably have a tutorial on it. And yeah, you can find me on YouTube, BTC Sessions, and then feel free to swing by on Fridays for those panel shows, because they're a lot of fun. We get to just chill out and chat Bitcoin.
Hell yeah. And as always, you guys, BTC Sessions is going to be at Bitcoin 2022 as well, along with me. So if you're there, come look and say hi to us. And I don't know, which are you going to be on stage? I think you're talking, right? I thought you saw you.
Yeah, I'm doing a couple things. I'm going to be doing some of the like live stuff. There's like a live desk of announcers, like as they're announcing different things. So I'm going to be on that a couple different times, but I'm also moderating a panel with Jimmy Song, Jeremy Rubin, and Paul Stork about soft forks. So I'll be doing that at the open source stage.
Amazing. I'll be around the open source and FOSS areas. You know, that's kind of where I hang out the most. So I'll be seeing you.
Man. Awesome, Ben. Man. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, brother. Talk soon.
I love it.